On April 5th of 1992, at the climax of Wrestlemania 8, it all came crashing down for the Hulkster. A beatdown by Psycho Sid and Papa Shango. But at the last moment, an old friend and rival came to save the day. The Ultimate Warrior. But there was one problem. According to a lot of people, this was not the original Ultimate Warrior. Nowadays, it's really hard for WWE or any other wrestling company to surprise their fans. It seems like the very second any big signings happen or there's any kind of backstage news, the dirt sheets are already reporting on it. If you're a wrestling fan and you want to avoid having things spoiled for you, it can be really hard to avoid them, and you have to be really conscious about the sites you browse. But things were very different in the 80s and 90s. People in the wrestling industry at that point were just a lot more protective of any kind of behind-the-scenes information. But people still had the same desire to know the truth of what's going on behind the scenes and what's going to happen, and because of that, all kinds of crazy rumors and misinformation would pop up. And today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite of one of these rumors, the old story that there were actually two Ultimate Warriors. The two Ultimate Warriors story was a rumor that was repeated so much throughout the 90s that a lot of people thought it was true. In fact, there are probably a lot of people watching this who did think it was actually the real thing that happened. To everyone else, that sounds completely ridiculous, so how could such an idea spread around all over the world? It's like that S thing that for some reason everybody knew how to draw. One of the biggest contributing factors to this is the confusion around the Ultimate Warrior's disappearance in 1991 and his subsequent return in 1992. You have to figure the Ultimate Warrior was a top star, very over with the fans, and basically groomed to be the successor to Hulk Hogan. Yet after the main event of Summerslam 1991, he just simply vanished with absolutely no explanation. Of course, it was really confusing for fans that a guy would go from suddenly being the main event of one of the flagship events of the year to suddenly not even at house shows or anything, just gone. The fans could tell that this was not a normal thing, but without the backstage reporting that we have today, they had no idea why. And a lot of people thought he just died. And there's a lot of ideas about what caused him to die, most of them regarding steroid usage. The original Ultimate Warrior died of liver failure due to his steroid usage. Rather than killing off the UW character like he should have, Vince McMahon chose to bring in a bad East Coast actor to play the new and improved Ultimate Warrior. What this guy will do to retain his millions, angry face. Another theory was that his muscles literally exploded. Is the Ultimate Warrior muscle explode myth true? When I was in college, my buddies said that Ultimate Warrior lifted Yokozuna and his muscle burst? I guess this is far-fetched, what can you say? The rumor that stuck with me as a then 7-year-old was that he wrestled Earthquake, and when he attempted to do his gorilla press slam, a muscle exploded in his arm, hence why he disappeared. And I'm sure, like me right now, you're picturing his muscles literally bursting like a cartoon character or something, but I was actually surprised to find out that this is kinda something that can happen. There's a condition called rhabdomyolysis, in which injured muscular tissue can break down and cause a dangerous amount of myoglobin to get into your system. This is extremely rare, but if it were to happen, it could cause kidney failure. Of course, the people spreading this rumor weren't thinking of that, though. They were thinking about his muscles bursting and he's flying away like a balloon or something. And then there was the other one that his armbands were so tight that it cut off his blood circulation and he died from that. And then there were some other slightly more reasonable proponents of the two Ultimate Warriors theory who thought, well, maybe he just quit and WWF owned the characters, so they just got a new guy to do it. It's a concept that isn't really that far-fetched, considering that we would see it play out later with the fake Diesel and Razor Ramon. So when the Ultimate Warrior did make his return in 1992, there were a lot of people who were convinced that he looked completely different. The biggest change that a lot of people cited was that although he was still really big, he wasn't as big as he used to be. And there were a few people that said that the new Ultimate Warrior had tiny baby feet. I'm not entirely convinced by the baby feet theory. But hypothetically speaking, say that there were two Ultimate Warriors. Who was the new one then? There actually were a few theories about this. One of the main candidates for being the second Ultimate Warrior was Jim Powers. Jim Powers was a wrestler whose top career highlight was probably being the first guy to lose to Ric Flair in the WWF. He spent most of his time with the company in and out of the tag team division and as an enhancement talent, aka a jobber. But he was definitely a big dude, and according to some people, he did have the look to play the Ultimate Warrior if they wanted him to do that. The only real problem being that he was a lot shorter than the Ultimate Warrior, and also he probably would have had to do a little bit of tweaking to his promo style.
They're relatively new. We haven't seen too much wrestling films on them.
You can feel it, dude!
There was another more plausible candidate to be the second Ultimate Warrior, and it's the guy that most people who believed in the theory thought was doing it. That guy would be the Texas Tornado Kerry Von Erich. There were a lot of factors going into why people thought Kerry Von Erich was the new Ultimate Warrior, the most of which being that they did have a really similar look. If we look at this picture of Kerry Von Erich, he basically has an identical physique to the Warrior. They're also the exact same height, they had a very similar haircut. I mean, the face is a little different, you might say. But you know, you throw some face paint on there and a lot of people will be fooled, especially small children. If the WWE were to cast a new Ultimate Warrior in 1992, Kerry Von Erich would be an absolute no-brainer to play the part. And another factor that contributes to the Kerry Von Erich as the Ultimate Warrior theory is that he also disappeared mysteriously around the same time. His last appearance before the Ultimate Warrior returned was at the January 1992 Royal Rumble, where he was eliminated by, who else? Ric Flair. He would not reappear again until slightly after WrestleMania, and even then, only as a curtain jerker on Superstars and house shows. So it would be very easy for someone to have missed those appearances and just assumed he was working as the Ultimate Warrior now. Another factor that would reinforce this rumor was that in 1993, Jim Hellwig, the man behind the Ultimate Warrior, would have his name legally changed to Warrior. And due to the nature of how information would spread in those days, it was like playing a game of telephone where eventually that news turned into you had one Ultimate Warrior who was Jim Hellwig, and then you had the other Ultimate Warrior that was just Warrior. And then, did you ever have a friend tell you that they saw the Ultimate Warrior on WCW? I'm talking about seeing him before, you know, Hulk Hogan imagined seeing him in the mirror and all that business. Well, if they told you that, they had probably seen this guy called Renegade. At the time, WCW had recently signed Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, and they were really going for getting all the old WWF classics. Hulk Hogan started promoting something called the Ultimate Surprise, and they were showing the silhouette of a man who, if you didn't know better, would say he was definitely the Ultimate Warrior. But unfortunately for WCW, they couldn't secure a deal with the Ultimate Warrior, so instead, they just got this dude called the Renegade. They found some guy who vaguely resembled him, threw on some face paint, had him mimic some of the gestures, and here we go, we got our Ultimate Surprise. Nothing really matched up, but I guess there were enough people who believed it, because at some point Jim Hellwig, Ultimate Warrior, did debunk the fact that he in fact wasn't this guy. No, this was not the genuine Ultimate Warrior, this was a male stripper they hired named Richard Wilson. And even though this ploy by WCW did manage to fool a handful of naive kids, I think perhaps it's the best proof at all that there really is only one Ultimate Warrior. A fact that we'd all be reminded of back in 2014 when the Ultimate Warrior made his triumphant return back to WWE, gave an unforgettable speech that almost sounded like his own eulogy a day before passing away. There really is no doubt that the two Ultimate Warriors theory is complete nonsense, but even still, what happened in 1991 then? It's still obviously not normal that one of their top stars would just mysteriously vanish out of nowhere. Well, there's actually a series of correspondences between Vince McMahon and the Ultimate Warrior that was released a few years ago that tells us what happened. Essentially, the whole thing boils down to a dispute over pay. In a handwritten letter to Vince, Warrior airs his grievances. I want $550,000 released from the monies allotted to me to purchase my home. This will suffice as my WrestleMania 7 payoff, but let it be noted that it is not fair. I meant as much or more to that show as Hulk. I deserve to be paid the same. I know what Hulk will get. 4 days off every other time period except pay-per-view only. I want the same pay cut as Hulk gets on all pay-per-views, Saturday night main events, Friday primetime, house shows, and proof as such. The same pay cut applies to what Hulk has been paid with relationship to past events, WrestleMania 5, 6, 7, i.e. when Hulk was the top draw. I want numbers and proof of monies done on 1/900 Hulk, and likewise same pay cut. Same pay cut on all forms of merchandising. And with the main event to SummerSlam 1991 on the line, Vince McMahon decided to comply with his demands. Dear Jim, this letter is in response to your facsimile to me of July 10th, 1991. You will be paid an aggregate amount of $550,000 for your participation in WrestleMania 7. With the exception of special events only, you will receive 4 days off every other time off period. Your pay rate on house shows will increase to 4 to 5% of the net, effective immediately, with the understanding that no other WWF athlete will be paid at a higher rate. Likewise, no other WWF athlete will be paid at a higher pay rate than you on pay-per-view events. Effective immediately, your royalty rate on all forms of merchandise is to be increased. The specific amount will be determined in writing within 1 week. Your compensation for the Warrior 900 hotline will be identical to that of the Hulk 900 hotline. Likewise, documentation for this will follow in writing within 1 week. I regret the turmoil you've put yourself through, and you're agonizing over what you feel is fair compensation. And even though we have a difference of opinion over some of these matters, I am resolved to work with you in the same honest and equitable way that I always have. Furthermore, I would like to express to you my deepest appreciation and admiration for you as a performer, as a member of the WWF family, as a man, and as my friend, Vince. But then once SummerSlam 1991 had passed, Vince McMahon immediately suspended the Ultimate Warrior and told him why. You have become a legend in your own mind. You are certainly entitled to your opinion. However, you are not entitled to vent your feelings by breaching and threatening to breach your contract. In particular, you have breached the contract by failing to appear at matches in which you were scheduled to wrestle without a legitimate excuse, including matches which were scheduled to be televised, failing to cooperate with our booking department, and being rude and abusive to WWF fans. You also threatened that, unless I met your demands, that you were going to stay at home, not appearing at the numerous events which Titan has booked for you as far out as April 1992 on WrestleMania 8, unless and until you were giving all of the perks and pay of Hulk Hogan. Of course, you did not make your threat until Titan had spent tens of thousands of dollars to promote these events and your presence at them. Therefore, when on July 9th, 1991, you threatened to stay at home, thereby not even appearing at Titan's major summer pay-per-view event, SummerSlam, I had no choice but to accede to your exorbitant demands. Paragraph 9.6 of your contract provides that you shall use your best efforts in the ring in the performance of wrestling services for match or other activity. Titan's available remedies for your breach of these obligations are severe but fair. You forfeit any future payments of royalties, and you are prohibited from using or exploiting the persona and characterization of Ultimate Warrior or any substantially similar likeness or name thereof. Note that in all likelihood, Jim Hellwig changing his name to Warrior was because of this stipulation. However, rather than suspend you for the duration of the contract term, September 23rd, 1992, a remedy which Titan has under paragraph 12 of the contract, I am temporarily suspending you from bookings. So there you have it. A dispute about money was ultimately what led to one of wrestling's longest, most persistent, most ridiculous urban legends. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this other one about the completely insane endings to WrestleMania the arcade game. I'm out of here.